Bonsoir. L'école d'architecture est très heureuse d'accueillir Alexander Sverdlov, qui est enseignant-chercheur à la Y Factory de Delft. Pour rappel, enfin pour ceux qui ne font pas partie du domaine architecture et complexité, on a eu la chance avec les étudiants d'aller à un workshop à l'automne. Et donc on a été accueillis là-bas pendant une semaine, enfin les étudiants. Et puis on a souhaité mettre en place un échange plus large. Et donc il est là ce soir pour nous présenter le travail de la Y Factory. Et on lui a aussi demandé de nous présenter son travail. Parce qu'il a donc commencé ses études à Moscou et ensuite à Rotterdam. Il a travaillé dans des bureaux prestigieux comme chef de projet, notamment dans l'agence Neutling, à l'OMA. Il a été lauréat de concours d'architecture prestigieux. Il est souvent appelé à participer à des jurys dans des écoles aussi prestigieuses. Et donc vous avez peut-être pu voir cet après-midi déjà, je dirais, la pertinence des critiques. Donc on est très heureux de l'accueillir ici et je te passe la parole. Ah oui, oui.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Good evening. It's been a long day for most of you. It's Friday, it's the end of semester. And you also had your final presentations today. I'm very glad to be here. I'm very glad that we started this collaboration between your institution and the Y Factory. I would very much look forward to see how it continues further. Today I had a kind of glimpse at work you are doing here. And the work, I think, was quite impressive. And already the first conclusion I will make is that we will have to increase pressure on our students in Holland after seeing this work today. So it was great to see that the projects are very complex, and each of the participants of the studio is actually bearing a lot of responsibility for each project, as on the level of the overall, as much as on the level of the detail. I'm going to show you some work of the Y Factory, and maybe while showing it, I will try to explain how we work and how we run our studios there in Delft. So basically, I will show you the results of 2 studios, 1 workshop, and 1 research in progress. Which, yeah? Should I? I have to speak louder. You see what happens. Okay. So basically, the work is organized around certain research topics. And these research topics are kind of pursued in this, I would say, 3 major formats, which one is the master studio, another one is a workshop, which assumes, say, a kind of short action, speedy action, storm of a certain topic. And then the publication, where, say, the results of the studio and the workshop are being edited and already presented to a general public. What to start with? Maybe I should start with the workshop. The workshop we've done in Berlin, in AEDES studio. If probably you know it, INCB, AEDES Network Campus Berlin, is a kind of equivalent. It's a great architectural institution in Berlin, which in a way is an equivalent of NIE, Netherlands Architecture Institute, but much more informal, much more small, much more cozy, and in a way much more full. So it became a tradition, we doing their workshop every year. So, as a little introduction, how this workshop was set up. This workshop was set up around the topic of old. Yeah? What to do with our history in Europe. We discovered that there is an enormous amount of buildings which are protected, such as, these are the examples of them, why they are protected. Some of them are really old, some of them are not necessarily old. However, if you see, specifically in the US, what is falling into the scope of being a heritage, you realize that there might be a little bit of a problem of as too much of the old matter is being preserved without properly reflecting upon it. So basically we had a kind of idea that we should take a showcase of Berlin and try to see Berlin as a kind of representation of a city with an extremely dramatic history in itself, where history is read, could be read in a most diagrammatic way, and see what we can do with that. What is the kind of background of this? 60% of commissions are renovations. So, like, we are already working with the old. I skip this. You see different examples of how the old is being done by architects on the architectural scale. And there is already a lot of this catalog of inventions as to what to do with the old building is already quite extensive. But the difference is that the point is that it's all these inventions and all this kind of creativity mostly happens on the level of architecture, on the scale of architecture. But what if it comes down to, say, to the, forgive me, I'm going too fast, but I will actually be going even faster. So what could happen if we try to do it on urban scale? Berlin in itself is an interesting case because, for instance, the price of the reconstruction sometimes is so high that maybe it's even non-ethical to do it. Maybe it's more ethical to build a new one. Yeah, like Reichstag is the case. These are like kind of basic questions which we posed in front of the students. How can we indeed deal with a kind of historic matter on the urban scale? I'll let it play. What we can do? What should we preserve? Do we need streets still? Or maybe we can finally get rid of these streets. Okay, so basically we worked with a group of 18 students from Germany and from the Netherlands, to whom we distributed nine specific sites in Berlin. Sites were chosen as representing, say, prototypical situations, whether it would be a suburbia, a 19th century city, or a kind of Soviet socialist neighborhood. And what we asked them to do, we asked them to compress history of 500 years within these 9 days they were working together. So basically it was set up in a way that students would get a site, 2 of the students would work on it for 4 hours, and then they would put a layer over the site which would represent the transformation of 50 years. Then they would shift and go to another site, and new students would come and work another 4 hours on this site as putting another layer of history on top of what was already there before. And in that way they would react upon each other. So that was a bit a kind of a fast-forward production of Troy, of Schliemann, you know, when he uncovered one layer after another, but that's what we tried to do in the opposite way. And basically, students work only with Bing images, only with Photoshop. And they had to, meanwhile, while doing these crazy things, they had to actually explain what exactly they were doing. And extremely interesting moments here are where actually you see the critical point where the old city is transformed to an extent that it sort of ceases to exist. So, this is something I'm not responsible for. So, in a way, what was the key aspect of this exercise? Of course, speed and a certain cynicism, but yet which sort of generated this mass, which later on could be reflected by the participants. This one I like. Very pessimistic. Also very pessimistic, I have to warn you. So at the end, it ended up in this little exhibition where all these projects were kind of shown as a matrix. And that's exactly the moment where the students were challenged to actually to explain the story as an overall and give their personal interpretations to this. Okay. Then the studio I will show. This is a studio which was called Vertical Village. It's a part of a larger project which MRDV and the Biofactory were running, which started as a collaboration of MRDV with Jet Foundation in Taipei. And this specific studio was done in a very kind of very framed format. So basically, students were only working in the model. Oh, one I have to say. What was the challenge? The challenge was to imagine the high-rise building, which is built not by the, predetermined design, but is kind of grown as a chorale of kind of individual inputs where neighbors join together, again, in time, one on top of another. And by that, they sort of make this collective building work. One little thing, that's basically how they started working, was will be shown in this film. So this was a draft. So they would build, add more neighbors and more neighbors and more neighbors and more neighbors, until the structure actually cannot take it no more and collapses. So by that, they learned a little bit how to introduce principles which allow these kind of individual agents to join together. So in a way, at the end, each building should be seen not as a kind of architectural design, but rather as a master plan, as a set of rules which allows individuals to form a collective. And again, they were only asked to work in the model and photograph the models. That was it. So these guys, for instance, they introduced the idea that this growth could be done also with a pixel of extra small size, when furniture also becomes a construction element. These guys were a little bit obsessed with climate, and therefore the project is built around a system of air pipes, which at the end could have been bigger. That sort of formed these kind of environments there. These guys just said that there is only one element which makes the whole thing, which is a bending strip. And this bending strip is simultaneously a structure, a wall, a floor, separation, unification, also a circulation. So, like this snake which kind of wrapped around everything by introducing different housing typologies. This is a very romantic one. The idea is that every new neighbor comes with his column, yeah, and then like a jumper, with pole jumper, that just sees where it's possible to put it and hits the ground. And finally, these guys, they went a little bit against the brief because they made the design in advance. And that's how they won an international competition while submitting this project. But basically, they set the rule that, okay, everybody gets a certain cubic meters of air. And within these cubic meters of air, the rule is that this your individual bubble could be filled only 35%. So 35% program, 65% air. And that's how the structure, which we set up as being deep, yeah, as being 50 meters, deliberately, to make it more challenging, the structure will guarantee light even in the core of the building. Sorry. That's how it looked. The funny thing with this is that they won a competition for a sustainable housing. And it's hard to imagine more unsustainable building than this, with this amount of surface steel and other aspects. So that's how they basically made it. Okay, so again, I think what is kind of what we try to do is that we try to set up the production of individual productions in a very kind of defined frame. So at the end, we kind of more or less know what we're going to be having at the end. Sometimes it backfires, and sometimes we feel that sometimes there is really, yeah, it sort of jolts the creativity. And sometimes we feel that it also maybe a little bit too much liberates from responsibility. But still, we are a young institution, and we're still learning how to do it. And finally, we hope that, actually, we believe that this is how we should continue doing it. Now the studio, am I going too fast or not? No. Yes? But I know everybody is tired, so. This is the studio we did with Lego in collaboration with this Danish Icelandic office Kratz, who actually introduced us to Lego. We put an agenda in front of the students that, okay, we're going to make a research studio, a research design studio, on what could be the idea of a European skyscraper and how we can, say, oppose the current production of skyscrapers, where you know that the skyscrapers recently grew in quantity and size, diversity, and mostly diversity of ugliness. Especially those like fading erections like this. But there are many. So even the person who actually made everybody loving skyscrapers, Rem Koolhaas, with his Delirious New York, at a certain moment claimed its death. Maybe he did it for his own reasons, but indeed what he said is that what initially promised to be the vehicle of surprise and the vehicle of modernization, the opening of a new world, became something which is very boring, a dead end, which is just a sole representation of kind of market force and effectiveness. And then, like, we showed the students this funny kind of competition for a Gazprom building in St. Petersburg, where actually European architects took part, stepping over a little bit their kind of moral thresholds, because, like, basically this is a skyscraper in the middle of protected city. But okay, they had to do it, I guess. And they were the following. It's like, this is Jean Nouvel. What he did is trying to deviate from the idea of traditional skyscraper with a, say, dictatorship of the core and repetition of the floors. He kind of unfolded it into one beautiful assumably transparent wall. This is hard to believe, but this is from Herzog and de Meuron, who also tried to kind of reinvent the idea, and like by a denial of a repetition of the floors. So every floor plan is different deliberately. The little thread you see there was supposed to be the private elevator of a director of a Gazprom, which brings the director straight to the penthouse. Herzog and de Meuron. Fuchs's did like instead of one, he did a group of towers, but we also, what you see is kind of untraditional a little bit, is that the core is outsourced outside of the building. And Koolhaas did the most kind of collective out of all. Basically, these are towers glued together around a huge collective atrium. So they all, in a way, tried to not to make an American skyscraper, and tried to make a skyscraper with a kind of extra public dimension to it. And that's why they lost all to this one, which is an American skyscraper designed by an American company. It's gold, you know, it's shiny and it's pointy. And despite the way it looks, it actually has absolutely repetitive floors. And it's solid, you know, so. Voila. We had 18 participants to challenge this. And 1 million bricks of Lego generously provided by the company. And what we say, okay, we start with the most American prototype, which is a World Trade Center, former World Trade Center. Let's not discuss its tragic history, but that was ultimately the representation of a kind of effectiveness in itself. 70 by 70 meters in a footprint, repetitive floors, 1 million square meters in total in 2 towers. What can you say against it? You know? But the funny thing, if you build it in Lego, you see that there are these pimples on the top, right? And that's exactly where the public, the only public space was there, where there used to be an observation platform. And then we say, okay, let's say that hypothesis could be that pimples represent publicness in one way or another, whether a balcony or a tribune, it doesn't matter. So this skyscraper versus this skyscraper is probably, maybe it's a little bit even less American, maybe. Okay, and this is in a scale, that's what we had, right? Basically, students made 676 towers in the course of 3 months, where each, basically there are 26 lines of transformation from America to Europe, maybe, or something else. But basically that is how it was set up. So each line would be a specific opening of the tower. Yeah? And then, yeah, they were themed and put in this kind of table where on one axis you would have the number of open pixels. So the more open pixels you have, the more you score. And on the other, it had the amount of square meters. At the end, we thought that maybe it was not so clean, but it looked very good. This is towers in our space. And those who didn't make it to the grid, we made them a specific like bastard island for them. So basically here you see how this transformation is made, but maybe the best way is to see it in a little film, which is actually is not a computer film. It's just 600 photographs which are put together in a movie. So then you basically see how this, what each line is. This one is wonderful with a mega auditorium. It was also interesting to see that how some of the transformations lead to a complete degeneration of the tower, and it's like eventually to its death. Those were probably the most interesting. So what you see is actually built. And that took 3 months of work. So even madness here was like welcome, you know, because it kind of contributed to an overall research. Even wrong things, you know, because not all of them are excellent designs at all. This is wonderful, I think. Some familiar faces from time to time. Anyway, what was I? Then what happened further on, that we shifted the scale. So this was scale 1 to 1000, and we said that we should maybe do a bigger one. And the bigger one in the scale 1 to 100, yes. And for that one, we set up a clear brief that if there is an envelope of a certain size, they should be, half of it should be program and half of it should be air. And therefore, computer-generated models, like it was first designed in a computer, as using Grasshopper in a way that you are able to control, first to introduce and then to control the parameters which make this specific type of porosity in there. Like for instance this one, yeah. First they divide the tower into whatever 10 parts, then they start to morph the floors. And then like this is the result. This one is very pure. It's probably the most successful of all. So you see how this kind of landscape creates these special cavities and how this specific porosity is achieved with others. Chambers, voids, stairs. So each of them in a way had a certain idea of a public element introduced into the tower. Why did we do it in the tower generally? Because tower is also a challenge for structure. We didn't do any kind of structural research on this one. We're going to do it next semester with Rob Nice, a fantastic engineer, who is going to be helping us with making stress diagrams for these projects. Yeah? But at that point, the towers just had to hold as being built in Lego. And some of them actually didn't, because each of them would weigh 300 kilograms. And some of them used glue, which was completely forbidden, but it was the only way to make them stand. So you see them together. This is a good representation of what we do, because they are all the same color, the same size. There are many, but each of them is different. So we kind of believe in the fact that if projects are, this was a lucky one, that if the projects are done successfully as a collective, then kind of individual result is immediately multiplied by, in this case, 9. Stop here, it says, okay. Basically, the towers are traveling now, and they went to Hong Kong to, to utmost delight of our students, and now they go to MIPIM, to the developers' exhibition. I'm curious what these guys what they're gonna say about it. And now I want to show you the kind of the final stage, which is not yet final, but excuse me, but is there an acrobat, or I might need a little bit of a help here. How to go to full screen, right? Because which which word I should press.
Yeah, the next one.
Édition?
No, next one.
Présentation?
Yeah.
And then?
The diaporama, the second word.
This is a book which is why? This is a book which is a result of several studios we had with the, I think, pretty interesting hypothesis that the world is being sunken in leisure. So basically that leisure is omnipresent in everything what we do. And not only leisure becomes the main vehicle of the economy, but also it becomes the new paradigm out of which we don't have any opportunity to live outside. The book is done in a very simple way. You know, it's just we kind of put on our students and on ourselves this like leisure glasses, and we just walk around and we just see leisure. And by that we form, and where we see it, we draw it. Yeah? And we draw it in AutoCAD. Well, not AutoCAD, it's yesterday, but in something. So for instance, we see a shower cabin. You know, it's amazing how much things you can do in a shower now. You know? Like it's, shower is like this size, this big now. So on one hand, it's about cleaning yourself. On the other hand, it's also about something else, about having pleasure while being clean. The shift from Frankfurt to a modern kitchen, which happened due to the fact that there was this fake fan invented, the one which doesn't take air somewhere else, but kind of recycles it. That allowed to put the island in the middle of the room. And that means that like preparation of food, which originally was a mundane, which was labor, now became something else. You know, it became a spectacle because you cook towards your partner who is sitting there in the living room. This is a different story. Unfortunately, this doesn't allow seeing how the desktop is organized, yeah? Because this is all about what you see, how people put things on their computer desktops. Even like, you know, there are many definitions of what leisure is. And some people include there, for instance, sex. And some people say, researchers, no, sex, you have to have it, you know, so it's not leisure. And some people say, sleep is not leisure, you know, because you have to sleep. But on the other hand, if you look at the section of a modern mattress, I think it's pretty much about leisure. If you go to IKEA, you have one mattress with a kind of extremely scientific section. Then on top of it, you have another mattress. And then on top of it, you even have another mattress. So you have like, it's like this now. So in that way, sleep is also maybe could be seen as leisure. We have it in two options. Things which also take a lot of time of, say, kind of in the life of contemporary individual is, okay, for instance, this meditation workshops or yoga workshops. Leisure, leisure. Bike, again, we present a section of the seat with liquid gel in it, you know. So, like even biking is also now, you know, it's a bit luxurious. It doesn't hurt no more. The amount of equipment, the living room, electronic equipment the living room might have is also amazing. The amount of things you might install in your garden. Fitness, we all know. But what is interesting in this case about fitness is that how compact it could become in terms of footprint. So how effective, say, this kind of the business model of it could be. Sunglasses, like everybody has sunglasses now. And everybody wears sunglasses. Everybody wears them like here, you know, or like this, or like this, or like this. There is no one who doesn't wear sunglasses nowadays. And they're all brand, you know, like Prada or Gucci. You know, and suddenly, you know, it's a little detail, but with others, you know, it makes a difference. If you look into the library, you know, like library is also full of couches, you know, it's full of chaiselongs. You no longer read like this at the table. You read in different kind of postures. Without it, library cannot function. And Winny was telling this example of some kind of new library somewhere in the middle of Africa, which already completely has the same pattern, that it cannot be done without a leisure component in it. Airport, yes, it's a station, infrastructure, but look how much things you can do there for your pleasure. A recent fashion of growing your own biological tomatoes. Again, who would expect that at the beginning of 21st century, the growing your own food, which was like completely the labor everybody wanted to forget and get rid of, would be fun. It is. Pets. The turnover of pet industry in the Netherlands is 9 billion euros per year. Yeah, 9 billion euros per year. For all these specific things like those, I love, you know, you pick up a ball and you throw it, and then your golden retriever brings it back, and you don't have to bend it to do. Balconies, as well. You know, no house without balconies nowadays. Balconies which were originally there for drying your laundry, how much things you can do on the balcony now. Coffee. Starbucks, there is a research and development department in Starbucks within which 40 people work only on cookies. And they only work on how to position cookies on the vitrine. 40 people. You know, so the kind of the effectiveness of what we kind of consume as pleasure is sometimes fundamentally amazing. Not to mention the office buildings. Say kind of no office building is now possible without this kind of public pocket, so to speak, a garden or anything like this. The plane, you know, like, okay, there is a certain number of thousands of transatlantic flights. And now you have these LCD screens in there. So the question is, how many pretty women were shown and seen in years? You know, many, like a billion times. You know, so like, I like this spread very much because it shows that the plane is actually a movie theater. Garden. The boat, the park, the house extension. Bird watching, yeah. Again, like bird watching only in the United States, again, $3 billion annual turnover of bird watching. City center, a car, you know, like, what car is that? It's not a Mercedes, it's like Opel or something. It also has LCD screens in there. Yeah. So you actually watch movies. The thing, and so on and so forth. Explain all of them. Observation platforms, which are a sign of conquering virginity in a very effective way. How many of them built? Now this is funny. This is AutoCAD for comparison of AutoCAD of 2000. Forgive me. AutoCAD, like catalogs from AutoCAD from what it was, 2000 and 2010. You know, you see the improvement of how many extra features for leisure were there. And finally, we end up where we started with our own space. You know, this is also leisure. You know, in this environment, and that's actually why we all know that in Delft we suffer a little bit from it. There are 2 people per chair, generally. It's a bit like overbooked, like everything in the Netherlands, a little bit. So you don't have a choice, but take your Apple, go to this 40,000 euro Vitra bench and sit there and kind of work, you know. And we have like this leisure equipment is spread all over this space, yeah? So on one hand, this school is a, it's a place for concentration, but on the other hand, it's also a place of fun, which it is. And here I finish. Thank you.